quickly for making a shirt. We'll look at ZModeler. I'll try and get into Maya, doing the quad draw tool. And then we'll just look at some other ways of generating surfaces, right? Because that's what you're going to need to do is go through and kind of check that stuff out. So I'll try and get through as much as possible today. If we can get to Shadowbox too, that'd be pretty cool. Shadowbox is great for clips and buckles and some interesting items, but we'll kind of see what we can get to, okay? So I do have a file from a student, this was last month. I went ahead and decided I'm going to use this because it was a great example of where people are at this week. And some of the issues that people will run into as they're going through this week. And I had a great meeting with the student, and we went through and we came up with some new techniques and other ways of making this look better. So you can see that they've got some structures built. Let me take off the wireframes here. They've separated some things. They've got some heavy wrinkle, right? And they did ask, did I go too far with this wrinkle information? And I said, believe me, it's got to go a long way from here to look accurate, so no, I think you're okay. But it is a little bit of a concern, right? If you don't take it further, this is too much. I would, it's something to be careful of, especially in this week, because we're looking for the shape. Now, why I was also okay with it is if anybody knows this character, he has, I think I've got the reference, so I want to bring up the reference. Unfortunately, I do not have the reference for that, but right, here's the character. So in this character, these items, their structural components has some wrinkle in it. So if you've got a dress that you're trying to make, or a skirt, or a loincloth, or this big, large folded fabric, you want to think about as you're building it and setting up the structure. You don't want it just to be this blank structure. Those are structural wrinkles, right? Those are really kind of in that feature. So trying to build that and sculpt that type of detail in can really create some issues. So that's something I would be cautious with, and I would tell you I'd probably build those structures in, right? So we'll use this file to look at a couple options here for this. So the first one is the upper piece of fabric, the wrapped fabric, and then we'll look at the loincloth and then possibly some of the other elements as we're going through the model. Another thing here is the anatomy, right? This anatomy is, right, we've kind of talked about this being where the anatomy is a little bit wonky, and you can see that they're making wonky anatomy as a result, right? You got to learn from those anatomy studies and learn how to bring that in. And then going into the face, right? This character is wearing a mask, but any character wearing a mask, glasses, their face is covered, they need a full head underneath, right? So you're going to want to make sure that you take care of that as well. The other thing to note about the faces, if you're doing anything that is in the real spectrum, right, human spectrum, even if it's cartoony, but kind of more on the higher end cartoony nature, cast a head, right? So if you can't see the head, you need a target. And even on the drawings, they don't give you enough information. You still need a target head. So I would look at casting heads, get in there and find yourself a celebrity or somebody that the head matches the likeness of the head that you're getting ready to create. In this case, they kind of free reign. You're just going to pick a head that would match the style of this character, and that becomes your reference for the head, right? You're going to want to make sure you have full faces. And when I say full faces, you know what I'm talking about, right? Just skull structure-wise, not eyes and stuff this week. Stay within the boundaries, okay? So let's see what we're looking at here, and we will utilize the reference. All right, so what do you want to do? The upper part of the shirt first, or should we look at the loincloth first? What do you think?
Loincloth.
Loincloth first? Okay. So the first thing here, and I'll go in here and select it, and we'll go ahead and solo it. Okay, so it's just a piece So the first thing you'll notice when we're looking at this loincloth is it does not have enough structural information built into it yet, right? The other thing, and this is a very common mistake, and it's not really a mistake, but for newer modelers, I want to try and make things a little easier for you. So the biggest thing that you're going to run into is, if you look at this thing, it's got thickness. A loincloth usually doesn't. A sash usually doesn't. It is just a piece of fabric. So not everything has to have two sides, and you will eat up a lot of your topology building everything with two sides, building everything double-sided. Okay, so one of the ways I like to use the extraction is to generate a cleaner one-sided surface in a lot of cases. I'm not really a fan of generating a structure with two sides. I kind of leverage more of what I used to do in Maya, where I would generate a nice shape, and then I would give it thickness. I would establish some topology ideas into it, and then I would give it thickness. So a lot of times here, I like to do the same thing, and if I don't need to give it thickness, I'm already at that point. So let's look at recapturing. So they've gone through the feature of building this thing into multiple pieces, breaking it apart, and shaping it, right? And then they were like, oh man, now you want me to do all these other things. But sometimes you're going to break it into a piece so you can do more with it. Okay, so don't think that you're spinning your wheels or wasting time if that happens. Okay, so in certain cases, I'm going to go to Shift F so we can look at the wireframe, and I'm going to make sure that I can see polygroups as well. Right, and this does not have polygroups front and back. Okay, we can try to generate some polygroups, but honestly, that's kind of a pain, right? It likes to, especially on something like this, where we don't have a clear defining, section or swap there or change in direction. It just doesn't work out all that well. So we're going to utilize a different method. I'm going to go through and use my masking. Right, we're going to mask off the front of this. And I'm going to make sure that I'm under brush, auto masking, and make sure backface masking is turned on. Otherwise, you're going to be masking the back side of it. And this may not work, right? I did a different method with it last month. So we'll see how this goes. We'll hit the X key because I want to get something kind of clean. And again, I'll look at multiple ways. We'll talk about multiple ways of doing this. Make sure you're not masking anything on the back side. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and make my brush a little smaller because now we need to go down the edges of it. And I'm going to take off the wireframe because we really don't need to see that. Let's make sure we're not getting anything. Because another thing that happens with these really thin structures is you tend to pull the backside through the front side if you're not careful with the backface masking feature. Or then you can't see here, but you'll have geometry pulled through, and that kind of gets into some other things. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and just make it a little bit nicer. Remember, I'm going to introduce you to a lot of tools today. Please don't look at it and go, well, that's the only way I can use this. Look at what's happening, look at what these tools are doing, and then start thinking about how you might utilize those in a different operation or for something you need. sure we don't recommend those. All right, so now we've got that. So we're going to source this, right? So, I want a cleaner structure. I'm going to source this geometry. So to do so, I'm going to go up to Subtool. There it is. There's a lot of pieces here at this point. Okay, looking at that. I'm going to go to extract. This time I'm going to turn extract to 0. I want a 0 thickness extraction. Okay? This is going to give me a one-sided surface. So I go ahead and extract. Accept. And there's that piece. Now I've got under display properties at the bottom, I've got double turned off. So if I want to see it from both sides, just turn off. So now I've got something that's going to cut my poly count in half, and it's going to be easier to manipulate. I don't have to worry about pushing and pulling and shoving it through the backside or whatnot. I could work with it a little bit more freely. But I want more functionality. Right now, this topology, I've got some weirdness where the mask took place. I also have some weirdness on the edges here. And overall, I want a cleaner structure. So if I'm going to do this for like a t-shirt, or in this case where I'm sourcing this loincloth, I'm going to utilize the Z-remesher functionality to get myself better initial topology to work with. Okay? It's still going to work with the shape that we have, but I'm going to be able to use it to take care of some of this stuff here. Okay? So we'll focus, we'll be looking at that little weird spot at the end. And then we're going to be hoping it takes care of some of the other stuff. I do want sharper corners because it does look like this has sharper corners, not rounded corners. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the move tool, move brush, sorry. And I'm going to go to brush, curve, and I'm going to turn AccuCurve on. And what this is going to do for the move tool is instead of pulling this rounded shape, it's going to pull more of a point. So this will help for refining corners and edges. Right? So if I go in here and I start grabbing that edge there, see I get a little bit more of a sharper point. And I will run into problems simply because this is not symmetrical. Right? They've already went in and sculpted some asymmetrical stuff in there. I could at this point choose to either work with it by hand and do each side separately. Just kind of smoothing it out a little bit, relax. Or I can mirror it over and just start kind of fresh, because any of this asymmetrical shaping could possibly affect the topology that I'm going to get with it. But even that right there kind of will help. Right? I'm just looking to get some geometry that fits the shape a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to go into geometry now, and we're going to look at Z-remesher. Okay, so Z-remesher is basically a retopologizing tool. It's going to look at the surface. It looks at it two different ways. It's either going to look at it and say, let me adapt the topology to the shape, or I will allow you to use control curves, right? So I can guide it a little bit more with control curves. So we're going to just do adaptive, right? Target poly count, we're going to set to 5. That's the default. That stands for 5,000. So 10 would be 10,000, so on and so forth. And this is just a really kind of like it's a basic number, for it to try to stay within, but usually doesn't. All right, we can go a little bit lower. This is just a loincloth, right? Let's go a little bit. Let's go 1.4, 1.5. Okay, we're going to go ahead and Z-remesh. And the defaults, we're just going to run with those and see what we get. Okay? That did some interesting things there. But you notice how it kept some of our shape, right? So this shows me, one, that I don't need a lot of geometry to get good form. Right? A lot of people go down that road of, I just need more. And in some cases you do, but for me, my workflow is more of a, let me up-res so I can get cleaner separations of pieces. Then let me Dynamesh and fill out whatever I need, but then I'm going to Z-remesh to get a more structured topology that's going to result a little better for me. Or in this case, we started off with a lot of geometry. Now we're working into, I mean, we can see how much geometry we have now versus what we started with, but there's a back piece here. I mean, that's 18,000 polygons. We're now at 1,700. Now, this is not going to allow us to get the wrinkles that we want, but it's going to allow us to get a lot of that structural stuff that we want, okay? Because even if you look at it, the wrinkles that are in here don't match what's going on here anyway. So we're going to go ahead and keep working with that. Okay, so one other thing you'll notice here is that the geometry is different left and right. This is because I took off symmetry. If I turn symmetry on, it's almost like a mirror and weld. It's going to pull whatever geometry it puts on one side and throw it on the other side. If you don't care about that too much, and remember, we are not building our end-all be-all animatable topology. We are building topology that will respond better in the initial stages of the model and be more efficient for us. That's what we're doing. This is not, if this is a background character or something like that, I can Z-remesh it. That could be my production topology, but in most cases, it's not going to be. So I'm going to look at it and see if there's anything funky there. I'm going to go back down to the Z-remesher. And the cool thing about Z-remesher is you can Z-remesh over and over and over again. Okay, so I'm going to kick it in half. And I think that symmetry is back on. Let's hit Z-remesher. Nice and clean. It did pull some over the side. Look what it did to the sides. Let's undo. You see how we have all this weird topology here? Right, we can try and fix that just by moving some points around. And so sometimes we can come in here. I have the move tool. I'm just going to move some vertices around. I'm going to see if it's just keeping it where it's at. Symmetry's going. Yeah, I'm going to turn symmetry off just to see if I can get that to correct. See how we got better topology out of it? Just by moving some vertices, right? So sometimes if you've got a wonky edge, because of the way it extracted or the way you've broken apart the surface, if you flatten out the edge, right, get it into the valley of suck, it's going to look weird because you're just kind of moving verts in line to try and get a straighter border so that it will clean it up when you run the tool. Okay? So again, not bad. I mean, we still have that little funkiness. So I guess now the question is, do I care about symmetry or do I not care about symmetry? Right? All month you're going to be using those three questions I gave you on the first day. What do I know? What do I have? What do I need? You got to be asking yourself questions. Do I need symmetry or do I not need symmetry? Since this model is very young in the modeling process, I shouldn't be that worried about asymmetrical things. I should shoot more for symmetrical at this point. Okay. Now, if it's like his wrapped sash top, there's nothing I can do about that. I kind of have to deal with working that structure there. So I'm going to go with symmetry here. I'm going to turn that on just to make sure it's the same. And this will affect your shape. I'm going to go with the same topology counts that seem to work out nice. It's just enough that I can work with. And I'm going to go just Z-remesh it again, just so I get the same topology left and right. There we go, looking clean. And if you want to go lower, in some cases, like when I do the shirt, I'm going to go pretty low on the shirt so I can situate my edges and get everything, just like in Maya, established before I start giving it thickness or adding pieces to it. Okay. All right, so we've got that. So if I wanted to go in here and say, all right, well, the bottom should be a little bit more relaxed because that's not the shape, right? The shape is more straight. So I'm going to go ahead and here make that a little bit bigger, maybe. Good. Finish it on. Move that down. Because, you know, getting the base structure right is what's important. This is also, it's not really flared out. So and there's other ways you can scale this in. Okay, cool. Let's go same. Okay, so that's a little better for me. Right? It's nice and clean. It's matching the reference better. And I would be looking at this in the scene. My reference would be in the scene, right? So you would have something you can match it right to. And that's another thing, you know, when I look at it, I was like, that doesn't match the what reference are you going off of? All right, so then, you know, what can we start doing to generate some shapes? Well, you know, the geometry is pretty good. Let's look at it. Looks like we have, you know, some tight wrinkles in there. I'm going to go symmetrical, and then once I get them, because it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 center line down the middle. That looks like we're okay. Actually, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these two blend together, but that's easily fixed. So now we get into inflating, deflating. You know, what do we want to do with these? So there is a really good video that you guys get to watch where he shows grabbing and rotating masked points, unmasked points to kind of create larger volume wrinkles. The other thing you can do is, you know, make your brushes a little smaller, and then go ahead and let's take off wireframe. We don't need to see that. We kind of mask that off, and then we can either inflate. Actually, I want invert. We can either inflate these out by using deformation. Inflate. We can start pushing. We can just pull. Right, make our brush really big. It's going to look choppy until you get in and start working with it. But we're just looking to put markers that then we can work with. Really trying to push. Let's get that intensity up there. Really low. And then the edges, if you want to just grab them and move them, you can. Right? But now we're getting more of that shape, and then we can add some extra geometry in there. Now we can start really working with each one of these pieces. And okay, well, inflate that. Deflate that. Inflate again. Now we're really getting that rounded, wavy structure. Okay? So this is just a way to help, right? One, take away that thickness, and two, give yourself less to work with like you did in mine, right? we all know that pushing vertices around in Maya is a little bit of a struggle. Well, here, we don't have to always have a lot of geometry. We can kick it down a little bit and work with it, okay? And if you wanted to mask off the edges, right, let's say we wanted to round this off, well, don't forget, we've got, we can go ahead, let me take this one here. We can mask off just the edge, right? Or even if we wanted to go up there and paint along the edge, and then pull that edge down and then Z-remesh it again. Okay, there's a lot of things. Now, Dynamesh isn't going to like this kind of a surface, a single-sided surface, so you're going to be working more with subdivisions here, because Dynamesh would be out. Once I get one done, well, he's wearing the same thing on the back. I would just duplicate it, move it to the back, right, and reshape for that structure, okay? Now I'm going to build it another way. I'm going to go into Maya and build, right, so we can do the quadron. You can see that already looks better. You see the contrast on it. I mean, it's still rough. Let's get rid of the other one. Right, that's matching the feel of the actual article a lot more. Right now, things are very muddy overall. So this is working a little bit more. Now, I wouldn't go any more wrinkle information than what you're seeing here, just because, again, stepping into the next week, you want to make sure there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. I would definitely roll the corners out a little bit so we get that, we're not kind of hovering, so on and so forth. So. All right, so now getting into, let's do this another way, right, just to show that there's multiple ways. I'm going to go ahead and take the, let me see what we've got here. Do we still have the block out in here? I think we do. We can use that. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and use that. Okay? So I'm going to take this subtool. Right? You would take your block out to whatever's going to work for you. And I'm going to go ahead and just export. Let's put this on the desktop. OBJ is going to be fine. Go and export it. Because for this, I'm not going to use, I'm not going to utilize Quadral yet, but I am going to utilize NURBS curves. Okay, but again, I don't want you to forget that good old Maya exists. Open that up. Drag and drop this in. Now you might catch some errors here. I've never done it with this actual surface, so I don't know how much geometry it is or anything like that. It shouldn't have been too bad. Struggling a little bit. I'm going to go File, Import. I would check this all the time as well. Single object is a really nice option to be working with. I don't think it brought anything. Let's try it again. All right, didn't like the drag and drop. Okay. Now we've got that in there. If you're going to do this back and forth between Maya and ZBrush, don't change the size in Maya. Just build off of it, use it as a placeholder, don't change anything. Because when you want to be able to import and export and have it be a one-to-one, you want to be able to just, when I make something for this, and I export it out, and I bring it into ZBrush, I want it to go exactly where it's supposed to go. Okay, so pretty important. All right, so I'm going to go in here. I told you I was going to use NURBS curves. Okay, so I'm just going to go in and grab. Sorry, I'm in the wrong. Curve tool, CV curve tool. Right? And I'm going to try and be a little systematic. I don't want to get into rebuilding curves, duplicating curves, mirroring curves, or anything like that. We just want the one thing there. So I'm going to give myself enough geometry. I think it was one through the center, and then an indent, and then another one on the outside. So I'm going to hold X. I'm just going to start dropping in some points. And this will be plenty. If I wanted to add more, I could, but I just want to show you the basic idea here. So now there's a curve on screen. I would go in and make any shapes. If I wanted to add a little bit more structure to it, I can. And if you found out that you're like, hey, I need a little bit more, we can go to edit point. Curve point. There we go. And I can add in extra points. So we go ahead and we throw it in there like that, and we say, all right, you know, I want another one over here. I want another one over here. I want one in the middle. These are like putting in extra vertices and curves, and then we're going to go insert knot. What that's done is it's given us some more points to work with. We can get into a little bit more fun structure. Okay, so let's say that's, you know, we're like, hey, I like that, that works out. I'm going to go into object mode. I'm going to select it. You have your center pivot and all that good stuff. This is going to be for the top section. I'm going to duplicate it. Reference. Okay, I'm going to grab one, grab the other. You could just do an extrusion, but if you want some of your shape, I'm going to use a loft. Right, the two main types of building is extrusion with a curve. Right, and the way extrusion works, you should be familiar with making a cable in Maya, where you took a circle and you drew out a curve for a cable and you extruded along that path. That's extruding along a path. The other way you can do it is just extruding a distance. So if I wanted to take this top one and just extrude down -10 units, I could do that. But I want a little bit of shape change between these. So let's say I was doing a sash, I can duplicate it, move it, and as it builds the surface, as I loft from each curve, it will adapt the shape to that curve. So I can get a little bit of structure out of the tool, out of the surface creation. But, you know, I'm just kind of going through just to show you a little bit more, because you already know how to do extrusions. So what you have to understand also with a loft is order of selection. If you were, let's say you did this with 4. Let's say I was doing a longer structure, there was a lot of waving happening, or, you know, general shape change happening. If I selected curve 1, then curve 3, then curve 2, then curve 4, it's going to go from 1 to 3, loop back around to 2, and then try and get down to number 4. Because that's just based on how I selected them. So I want to make sure you select them right. Then I'm going to go surfaces. We're going to do a loft. We are going to go ahead and do polygons, quads, counts usually fine. All right, we want to give it some geometry to work with. Okay, now the surface is backwards, no big deal. Just go mesh display and reverse. Okay, it's not perfect, but it gives us a structure. So now I can take this, and if I want to change anything, again, the power here is the history connection. So if I grab that, I go to, not vertice, let's go to control vertice. I can take these and adjust the shape on the fly. And it's going to adapt, all the way from top to bottom. So if I was like, I want this a little bit smaller, give it a little bit less. I can arc this around the character, so I can grab, say, those, and those, turn on soft select. Give it a little bit of shape. And it adapts the entire, it adjusts everything from top to bottom. Right, so that's, again, one of the cool things about it. So now we've got that, we're like, cool, I like it. I'm going to go modify, edit, delete by type history. Now it's free. The history connection is now broken. Okay, I've done all my shaping I want. It's broken. Let's go ahead and take this, file, export, selection, OBJ. You can turn off all of the information. We don't need groups or anything like that. We don't need materials. It's going to give us those. So export selection. Let's throw this right on the desktop. Plot, export. Okay, should have written that. Plot OBJ, there we go. Now we're going to bring it into ZBrush. So the big thing to note here, when you're importing a mesh into another tool, is it needs a placeholder. Okay, so if you've got some throwaway surfaces, right? If you've got something in here that you can get rid of, if you select it, it will replace that subtool with whatever you're importing. Okay, the other way is to import it into a simple tool and then insert it into the tool, but a lot of people like to just go right into the tool. So if you don't have anything, right, you don't want to mess around with anything, then what you would want to do is put a placeholder in. So we do this by going to where we want. We're going to go insert, throw in something. It doesn't really matter what it is. Now that's going to be our placeholder. We're going to go up to the top. We're going to do import, plot, open. Okay. So now that's there. It's replaced it. Hold shift, bring back everything so you can see it all. And even, we made it a little short. It looks like he's not wearing the right. But now it doesn't mean, it's a piece of geometry. It's clean. I can now sculpt on it, add subdivisions to it. I can do whatever I want, but it was easier maybe for me to create in Maya in some cases. So think about that. Right? Everything needs to be here inside of ZBrush, but you can utilize Maya to create. Okay? All right, the other thing I would mention, go ahead and get rid of that. Look at something else. The other thing I would mention is the red wax shader has lost its glory as far as this goes. Walking into these further weeks, I would probably tell you switch to basic material, something like this. This is what happens with that red wax is it starts to create hazing in your detail points, and it makes it hard to read. It's neat looking. It's what ZBrush has run with for years, but again, it's sometimes difficult to work with. Okay. Let's see what else. Let's talk about this up here. this wrapped piece of geometry. Okay? The biggest problem with it, and something that I would expect or want somebody to take care of this week, would be the actual overlapping. Right? You have to understand how something's going to work. I've had this conversation with many students and artists, and they go, "Hey, I want to model this," and then I start asking them questions that they don't have answers to. One is, what is it for? How does it need to work? And they look at me like, "Well, I don't know. I've never thought about that." Very important, right? When we get into something, how does it need to work? If you understand how it's supposed to work, you can better achieve the illusion that it will work on screen. Doesn't have to necessarily work, but the illusion of functionality has to be there. So last month, a student was doing this cloth that was clearly wrapped up and around the shoulder, and they were just trying to fake the sculpture element. And what happened was the cloth came across the shoulder and then dropped down. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. I can clearly see that as it's drawn, it's wrapped around the shoulder and then hangs off the back. So why is it dropping down? Oh, well, I didn't really look at it that much, and I was just trying to get the shape there, and I go, that's a problem. Another case when this came up was somebody was designing a character, and they came to me for help. I want to build this cape, shawl, helmet, hood thing. And I'm like, okay, first off, I can't understand what's going on in the drawing, so how does the cape attach? And they were like, I'm not quite sure. I was just kind of getting a cool look. And I go, okay, but is the cape attached here and then hangs off? Does the cape wrap around and it's like a scarf cape? Does it hang off of one side, both sides? I need to know this because I need to know how to model it. And I made sure that before we went any further, we modeled it accurately. Right? We figured out what it was supposed to do before we went in and actually started breaking it apart. Because that's really going to allow the thing to be what it needs to be. Now, there are things or methods you can use to fake the illusion, right? So if I look at this fabric, it looks like if I had to color block this, and this would have been something that a lot of people don't do in week one, because they go, oh, I just need to go around the big main objects. But one of the things you can take into consideration is, how is this big main object broken into pieces? So I might go in and say, let me go ahead and draw on it and say, let's see, this is a piece here. Maybe I can fake it with a seam in the back. But that's a piece. I'm going to build that separately. That's going to be its own thing. And then it looks like we have a piece here. I'm going to build that separately. Even though I sculpted it out of one piece, I might separate and extract these into their own pieces. What about, this looks like, this is one piece. Again, maybe we can fake it with a seam in the back. I'm not 100% sure. Sometimes my guesstimations don't work. That's going to be its own piece. And then it looks like this here should be a little piece there. And maybe I would do one last little one here. So right there, my goal is to build 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate pieces for this one upper garment. Why is that going to work better than trying to work with what I've got?
Because those pieces of cloth overlap, so it allows you to model.
It's that overlapping aspect. I'm either going to have to push and pull this so much and add so much geometry to look right, or I can just separate the pieces and stick them together. And I can just go, all right, let me slide this underneath, let's worry about that, go from here, and we're good to go. So then the next question is, how am I going to go about building this? What technique should I use? If we're working off of what the artist already has, they've got one large piece. So how do I now take it? I don't want to inflate, right? If I extract, is going to become a larger structure. And let's pretend that this is already matching the reference 100%. You know, what can I do to better achieve this look? I already know 100%. I have to think about it. Yeah.
Mask and the polygroups.
Mask and then do polygroups and then split each polygroup. Yeah. And then maybe Z-remesh each one. Because we won't want to dynamesh them. If you dynamesh them, we might get some weird stuff. Then we could, so we mask, polygroup, Z-remesh, and then extrude some thickness on each one. But we haven't gotten into Z-remeshing yet. Right? Maybe? How will I really know? I won't know unless I try. The other option would be to spit it out of here and go into Maya and quad draw on it. Right? Creating some strips or something like that, possibly. Right? But I'm going to stay in ZBrush. Let's try. Let's give it a shot. And I think I'm going to be able to achieve keeping this as one piece and just stopping short and then jamming it underneath the other one to show the illusion of overlap. Okay? So we have a workflow. We've generated a plan. Now we just make it happen. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Right? Just talk about it a little bit. I wouldn't think this is what I need to happen. Well, how am I going to make that happen? All right, so we have one missing element, which is extruding and giving it thickness within ZBrush. That's our only missing thing, okay? So we're going to try and figure that out, okay? And I'm going to have to break apart the backside as well. So first thing I want to do is isolate and keep the blinders on, focusing on what I need to focus on. Okay, there is that piece. So we're going to solo that piece. Let's go through and mask. There should be plenty of information here. I'll do a couple pieces just to show the workflow. Okay, so symmetry, not going to work. You can't do symmetry. Okay. I'm going to do an extract zero thickness. Okay, I'm going to go back to that piece. Clear. Do this little piece down here. Extract zero thickness. Accept. Good. And back up here. Let's clear it. Extract zero thickness. Accept. Go back. Clear. And now I'm not going to go all the way around. I'll just focus on this bottom section. Okay, we'll do that. Extract. Accept. That thing here. Yeah. Clear. thickness. Good. So we've sourced that sculpture and gotten all these different pieces out. Okay. Now we're going to go through and we're going to start replicating a procedure. I don't want to lose a lot of this shaping. I want to be able to work with it kind of the way it is. So we're going to go ahead and hide that, and let's bring up that piece. Okay, looks like we got a little piece that's missing. No big deal. Okay. So, right out of the gate, what I can do with what I have now go ahead and switch. Already we get a better look. There's that sharp contrast. I think this one overlaps this one. Oh. This one. I'm just clearing the mask every time. If you need to switch, just using the Alt key there to kind of push those around. Or change. Okay. Even here, we're getting more of that contrast, right? And I know there's some really large wrinkles in there, but I don't want that. I don't want I'm not going to go through every piece. You could go through and literally rip apart every large wrinkle and try and just billow it and make it look. But I kind of want that sense of these are strips of fabric wrapped around the character, larger strips that are folded. Okay, so now they're like that. We're going to look at the wireframes on them. I could work with what's here, but again, I want something that follows the shape a little bit more. So I'm going to utilize ZRemesher. And this ZRemesher is going to give me, for the next procedure, right? I know what works better with ZModeler is cleaner topology. So I'm going to try and get cleaner topology and start using ZModeler. All right, so let's go into geometry, ZRemesher. And I'm going to pick ones that fit with the size here. Let's maybe do this one at 500, roughly. All right, we'll try and keep it about the same. There's that. Look, it gives you geometry that fits the wrinkles. So you put a sculpt, you're just pushing it back, it works. Whoa! Exactly, that's the kind of excitement. Okay, so now we'll go to this one. We'll do the same thing, but we'll probably bring this down a little bit more. Okay, trying to keep those poly counts roughly accurate. And I think that's not really necessary. I'm just kind of okay, so we're still holding that shape, a subdivision or two, and all that faceting will disappear. But now we want to go ahead and give it some thickness so it feels like the thicker fabric. And I would encourage you to go through and make sure that all your pieces are situated the way you want them. Right, if you want to push and pull them a little bit more, or anything like that, kind of set up the overlap a little bit differently, this would be the time to do it. Setting up your meshes ahead of time saves you a lot of headache later on. So if I want to go through and work any of the corners, edges, or anything like that, do it now. Do it in this stage. It's going to work a lot better for you. Because you're only worried about one thin surface. You're not worried about anything crazy. You're not trying to grab the front and the back. Okay? So now we want to go ahead and give it some thickness. So we're going to start utilizing Z-Modeler. And I'm going to go ahead up here for this piece. Now, don't let Z-Modeler scare you. There's a lot of information. It's very daunting when you first look at it. So you just activate through the brush palette Z-Modeler. Z-Modeler works on any topology. Any vert edge face, whether you're working on Dynamesh or anything like that, you can work Z-Modeler. It doesn't really care. So what I'm going to do here is you'll notice now that my icon has changed as I float over components. It now highlights those components. Now to actually get the operators, you'll see that it's saying QMesh or polygon. Well, QMesh is extrusion. But they're, again, ZBrush being as clear cut and precise with its naming of things, QMesh and extrusion are pretty much the same exact thing, minus one type of operation, but we'll talk about that if we need to. Okay, so how do I change, right? Right here I'm QMeshing a single polygon. I want to QMesh or extrude the entire surface. So how do I get to options? Hold the space bar down while hovering over the component of choice, and you get a lot of scary stuff. Okay? Their naming here is a little bit weird, like what's a polygroup island, polygroup inner, polyloop, polyloop thin flat, flat island, flat inner, flat border. I don't know all of them. I know enough to be dangerous with the tool per se, and anything I need to know I will just quickly look up. But you can pretty much figure it out, right? If you're scared to hit buttons, you won't be able to figure it out. But if you hit buttons, you get the procedure you want. Hey, there you go. Remember for next time. So I'm looking at, I want to QMesh or extrude. Let's keep it simple, something we already know, extrude. And my target. So we have the operation. People say, how do I delete a face? I can delete. Right? How can I inflate, scale, spherize, all kinds of stuff. Okay, but I'm going to do extrude. And then my target, what do I want to extrude? I want to extrude all polygons because I know that I want to give this entire structure thickness. Okay? Let's go over here to where we can actually see how much thickness we need to give it. Now, I already know that I'm going to be extruding inward, inverting my surface. So I have to think about that. I will need to flip this. It's just like extruding the wrong direction in Maya. You create the reverse normals, it'll do the same thing here. So all you do now is you click on a point and you pull. And it now has thickness. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to go display properties. I'm going to hit flip. You can see that now we're seeing it the right direction. I've given that entire structure some thickness. Now if I don't like what I did there, just undo, grab it, extrude again, give it a little bit more so I can kind of really let these things intersect. Okay, so also at this stage, and possibly before this stage, you need to start thinking about holding edges. Because in Maya, sometimes you'll put in lines because you know as you extrude, you want to carry those edges into the extrusion. Does that make sense? If I want holding edges, I might put in some lines on a flat plane so when I extrude it, I get the holding edges all the way through the corner. Same thing here. If you know you're going to need holding edges, you can add them. I will show you how to add them. We won't need it on this because we're trying to get some cloth in here. So if you hover over there, you can see it says Insert Edge Loop. If I space bar, push and hold, I can choose Insert. I can choose Delete. You can also choose Do Nothing. If you find that you're working, I found Do Nothing to be very powerful when you have a lot of geometry and you're trying to do something because you're accidentally clicking on the wrong component constantly. So if you know you're just doing face procedures, turn vertices and edges to Do Nothing and it won't do anything. But I want to do insert single edge loop. And as long as I have an unobstructed edge loop, I can click and drag and add in an edge. I can also slide that edge. So I'm going to go back in, hit slide, edge loop complete, and I can slide it. So I can tighten it up, giving myself a stronger holding edge, and so on and so forth. Okay? We can also scale edge loops. So I can pull that in. This is sometimes nice for creating, helping a rounded corner or something. On this surface, because it's a little bit, it's not just a uniform, simple surface, it's not going to, just like in Maya, right, it doesn't know how to scale it. So that's going to give you some problems, something to think about, how you want to do that. But on some cases, like around a sleeve, you want to just inflate or deflate an edge loop to kind of get a little bump in or bump out. You just scale it, and it'll scale really nicely on nice cylindrical objects. Okay, so we have that. That's looking good. You can see it did it all the way around there. Really nice. Now we've got some thickness. And we'll go ahead and do the other surfaces, same thing. Now we have a procedure. So once we have a procedure, we just keep doing that procedure, right? I'm just flipping for the normals. Okay, now we want to work on some stuff. Let's go ahead and add some subdivisions in there. Let's take off the wireframe. Let's see if this looks better. I'm still going to go in and say, all right, you know what, I need to push this underneath a little bit more. Let's grab that EMB. Brush a little bigger. And now we have surfaces that are close to each other, so back-face masking when you're working with brushes will be important. I don't really care what goes on underneath there, right? Because I'm taking the illusion that this is, I just want it to be overlapped. And round that out, let's grab this one here. Okay, structural elements like this are more important this week, right? This is the kind of stuff you're looking for. You're building. So now when I go in here and I want to make sure that I'm getting the correct wrinkles, I can focus on just this piece, or I can focus on just this piece. And if I want to delete, let's say I start working on it, I'm like, you know what? I want to sculpt on this a little bit more. Guess what I can do? Just guess. I can make it single-sided again by deleting everything but that top surface, sculpt in some heavy wrinkle detail, then just extrude it again. And then do the same thing, the same thing I'm doing now. But that looks way better than what we had before, I think. And we can compare it by looking at what we had before, because we still have it, right? We sourced it. We didn't get rid of anything, and we'll see. You might be like, no. Way better now. Let's take a look. Okay, so now it feels like it's wrapped fabric with a little bit of work. I can start pulling a little bit more of this shape and pushing it. We have that contrast. Muddy feels like maybe they went and Play-Doh and smashed it on their upper torso to make their outfit. And the other one looks like it's actually maybe some kind of a wrapped something, right? So now I can go in there and I can start inflating, making, because right now that edge is too sharp. It doesn't feel like this thick canvasy fabric or whatever this stuff is. So I've still got a lot of work to do on it, but this is going to be so much easier to work with. So much easier. Okay? Make sense? Yeah. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, let's look at some more stuff. Okay? I'm going to show you a tool that's pretty neat. There's two. We're going to look at curve strap, which is great for straps. I mean, I love it when people don't use it for belts and belt loops and things like that. The name of what you're making is a strap. Why would you not use the curve strap?
That's why I'm not like a little difficult.
What?
What if I want to be like a little difficult?
Some people like the struggle, right? Struggle is not bad. You learn more when you're struggling through stuff. All right, so we're going to look at generating. I'm going to bring up another model because it's going to allow me to show a shirt using the same method and kind of some of the things you can do further with ZModeler, and then it'll allow me to bring up another tool. I do also want to point out on this one, before I move forward, on this one, his head, right? This needs a lot of skull structure still. One kind of reminds me of Enemy Mine, but we need to get in here and really start developing that skull a little bit more. There's a lot of ways. I'm just a fan of sculpture itself. So, I mean, we're going to go in here and make that a little bit bigger. Just make sure that that symmetry turned on. And then we're going to go ahead and we got that flat plane right here. Just pushing the ocular cavities a little bit more. And now we can start feeling the structure that's supposed to be there. Megamatic bridge. Switch. Oops, slow back. That's going to be a little bit more. When you look at the face from underneath, you're going to have cheekbones, you're going to have a nice flat plane, and then you're going to have this rounded, right, and the jaw. The plane running here on the side, and then we wrap around the jaw, around the teeth. It's just wedge. We also have the setter, and at the jaw there's another plane right around here. Just gonna broaden that up a little bit. Okay, now once we have structures in place, we can start to shape it. Temporal region. Always want to make sure we can feel more of the cranium sticking out of the back of the head. little better. Still fine. Right, now once you got those, you can start getting into measurements and everything. But this is kind of our target. This is what we're looking for. And you can see that if you know a little bit about the structure, you can get something fairly decent fairly quick. Next week, then we've got the ocular cavities where we go in there and we put an actual eye sphere in there and build some eyelids over it. We'd up-res it, we put lips on it, but this is pretty much your target. I normally don't show that because James used to show that in class, in the labs, but as we know, he's not there to do that right now. Right? But I can feel that skull structure. When I do the 3/4 check, when I pop around the side of the head, one of the first structures I see is that guy right there, the cheek. And if we rotate around, this is a 3/4. Usually people look at the head, they look straight inside. But what you want to do is start rotating the head this way with the camera right there, and then you should see right past the nose, boom, the zygomatic, the cheek sticking out there furthest point. You can see that happening right there. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Yes?
What about more toon characters that you chose from the toon folder that don't necessarily have a lot of detail in the face? And they are more like round shapes.
They're still gonna have. You'd be surprised. I mean, think about when they convert characters. Which one are we talking about?
The very first one where she has a normal arm and then she has a robot arm.
Okay. There's still, what I would do is look at her face and go, that kind of reminds me of Elastic. I don't think it does, but you can then find a target, a nice 3D cartoony face to utilize. Because even if we look at, you guys aren't allowed to use these, just want to stress it, I think you know it. Even if we utilize, even this cartoon face, there still is a cheek, a jaw, plane changes, brow, skull structure.
So that would be fine. Or
A shape like this?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? What happens is, I'm really glad you asked that question, because a lot of people go, well, it's just a cartoon character, there's no structure. I'm like, you see this little line here that moves? And one of the reasons we did contour sketching was to see beyond the drawing, right? What can we put there? But definitely find a target. Find a look that works well with that character, and I guarantee there's a 3D version of that somewhere out there, and you'll be able to use it for your source. Cool, great question, because we want to make sure that we do. Okay, what was I going to do? I was going to open up another scene, right? Curve straps and this other scene. I just like to bring this other scene up because it is a character that I kind of stopped working on a while ago, but I use him a lot in this stuff here. And he's got some clothing built, so you can see where you can start going with it. And I can talk to you about how I built certain things and some of the tools that we've been looking at, how they're being utilized in some points. Okay, so here's this guy here, and you can see he's got some clothing stuff on it. He's got a hat. Some real simple stuff. He's got some awesome shorts and some flip-flops. And flip-flops, I like the flip-flops because they have the little toe impression and stuff on them. Right? Okay, so the shirt and his pants were built not because of any specific reason. I think I was just doing a demo and decided to keep them. His pants were built in Maya using Quadral. I exported them out, brought them in, and drew out a basic set of pants, did the extrusion on the top and the bottom to give it some thickness, and then brought it in. Right, and then sculpted and made sure it fit 100%, and it went from there. His shoe, I used 2 different curved brushes, the curved strap with the help of Z-Modeler, and then the curved tubes flattened out a little bit. The bottom of the shoe was created using the topology brush, which I'll show you in just a second. It's a great little brush. And I just took a plane, traced the shape of a shoe, kind of, and then gave it some thickness, shaped it around his foot, added some edges. There's a lot of Z-modeler going on in this shoe itself, okay, for some of that functionality. And you might be thinking, well, I can just make that real easy inside of Maya. Well, then do it, right? I cannot stress it enough. You are not stuck in ZBrush this entire week. If it's easier for you to generate the starting structure inside of Maya, then bring it over and then shape it, because hands down, the move brush and everything inside of ZBrush and the fact that it can handle so much geometry makes shaping things a lot easier here, but the initial build can happen inside of Maya, right? It just makes sure it comes into ZBrush at some point. His shirt, I do like to look at his shirt because his shirt shows how something gets broken into pieces. So here's a shirt that started as one piece and ended up being multiple pieces. So when we look at them all together, we get this. Okay, one of those little football jerseys. And this was done starting as one piece, situating topology, separating. So I've used a lot of things that we've already talked about. Mask off where I want the shirt, extract zero thickness, Z-remesh it to a nice low topology, situate my edges around the sleeves, the belly and back, and around the neck. Add in holding edges where I want the thickness of the cuffs, the little collar pieces. Extracted those, right? I made a custom poly group around, extracted them, and then extruded separate thicknesses for each one of these pieces. So I've just done everything we've talked about up to this point to generate this shirt. Right? It's just kind of a combination. In 3D, sometimes it's a lot of simple things put together in what appears to be a complex manner, but if you break it down into what each step is, it becomes easier to achieve. So, without further delay, I will run through this process really quickly on the shirt. I'll go ahead and bring up his, and the hat was generated in Maya. I started it in Maya. I went through and just created a sphere, shaped it around his head, selected the pie shape, that would be the hat, right? Added some edges so I can get the shape of the one section of the hat, right? It's got those little sections. And then I duplicated it around, merged everything, brought it in, just took a cube, shaped out a bill, and we ended up with a bill. So, and then the nub is just a flattened sphere, and then shaped a little bit. That's all the nub is. So, going into his body here, let's, and if you're gonna quad draw this guy, he's 3.4 million. That doesn't work well inside of Maya, so he has been decimated. I have a duplicated, decimated body. The way you do that is select the high res, duplicate it, go to Z plugin, decimation master, keep the defaults, they're great. Let's just make your asset easier to go back and forth between Maya. Pre-process current, once it's done with that operation, decimate current. So now instead of bringing 3.4 million into Maya, I'm bringing 1.3. And the shape is identical. Okay? But the topology is covered. Right. So it's a little bit of problem. So for this process, though, I'm going to use the higher one. It's going to be a little bit better. That. Yeah, let's go. double check you are masking, just like selections in Maya, you wanna make sure you're not doing it over and over and over again. It won't have to be super clean because a lot of the Z-Remesher will take care of any kind of wonkiness that's on there. We're gonna extract zero thickness. It'll take a little bit because there's quite a bit of geometry it's extracting from. And hit accept. And we've got the shirt. Okay. We're gonna go and clear that. And we will go into geometry Z-Remesher, same thing. I'm gonna run the defaults because taking it down too much right out of the gate is sometimes tough for it. Symmetry is turned on. I want the same topology on both sides of the shirt. I'm just gonna kind of let that run. Again, it's taking quite a bit of geometry out. So it might look like, you know, good time to go get a drink of water, go to the bathroom, something like that. Do its thing. Okay, so I'm gonna look at the wireframe now. It's still too much. I don't want that much geometry. So I'm gonna go ahead and start kicking this in half. And you'll notice that now it's gonna Z-Remesh a lot faster, a little bit less. Trying to get it to fuse that together, this edge down the bottom. So, same. There we go, that's right. So you can see that moving it around and manipulating the shape to try and let it adapt more to what you need is better. Now, why am I concerned with this? Well, I'm going to use this for part of the modeling process. I need that V-neck. But now that we've got it going, I can go ahead and kick that in half again. But I don't want to go too far because I want to make sure that this V-neck is, you know, what I need it to be. But look at how easy I can just move and adjust an edge now. And I'm not committed to the shape because I know that all I'm doing is worrying about the forms. I'm not worrying about making sure this has a bunch of wrinkles in it. This is why we go through a process like this. I can do the same thing here. I can go around the edge and say, you know what, we want this to be a little bit straighter, bring that up. And if I want to set hang, right, the sleeve isn't going to be like, hey, what's up? I mean, this is a jersey, so it's going to hang a little bit off of there. It's easier to do it now with this single-sided surface with this smaller amount of topology. Case in point, the back. Okay, so let me go ahead and bring up his body, and then we'll look at the back there. Before like,
Not fitting, what are we gonna do?
a big deal, we will make it fit. deformation. We're gonna inflate it a little bit. Get enough. And then we'll just take care of the smaller areas. Okay, let's go ahead and make this back of the shirt hang a little bit. See a little bit of gravity there. Okay, it looks all ballooned, but if I smooth that out, pull that, kind of like a nice dance between smoothing and pulling. You should really work on the arc. How I want that shirt to hang. You'll notice that it gives me that little bit of that lip. You see that lip there? It's a little too extreme, but I can work with it. If you want to actually get vert control, just make your brush smaller. Really good on there. Alright, so it's easier to do that kind of stuff here to actually set the shirt where I want it to be over his belly. Give it a little bit of hang in the front. Give it a little bit of hang on the corners of the sleeves. Right? All that I would do on this low res. Now I'm going to situate some topology that I know I want. So I'm going to go back to ZModeler. That's a little bit more control here. Let's do insert, single edge loop. Okay, switch to move. Okay. And now I want to go ahead and separate the cuffs and the collar so I can give them thickness. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through and with ZModeler active, you hold Alt or Option, you click. You are creating a custom temporary polygon. Okay, now we're going to go split, group split. Now that collar's its own piece. Let's grab it, extrude all polygons, put some thickness. I know that I'm going to be smoothing it out. I want a little bit more shape to it. So we're going to insert an edge loop here. We're going to add an edge loop to each side. So we get some holding geometry. I don't want it to look like plastic, but I want it to be a little bit rounded. And then we're going to go ahead and see if we can't get scale. Scale it down a little bit. See, it gives us that nice little indent. And then we can subdivide it. Okay, now is this going to be perfect? No, we're going to have to tuck the other piece of the shirt up and in with it and stuff like that. All right, I'm going to have to come in here and move. I can very easily fake the illusion there. right? By just kind of letting these things. I'm not looking for 100% functionality, right? This is the look portion of generating these shapes. Right? I'm not looking for, hey, like I said earlier, we're ready to animate, and that's not going to happen here, okay? So that's kind of the process, and we're not using anything new other than ZRemesher and ZModeler, but the processes up to that point have all been things that we talked about and maybe you've used in week 1 or maybe you've started using them already. I don't need the shirt to have thickness. It's a thin material. I can go in there, I can start adding subdivisions to all this. If you do add subdivisions, think about shrinkage, right? If you want to hold the outer edge, you can either crease it or ZModeler add a holding edge around the outside of something and it'll hold it so it won't shrink in on you. Sometimes when you start subdividing, it gets smaller, right? The object gets smaller, it's just the averaging. Now, I told you I would talk to you about some other methods of generating shapes. Let's pretend that this guy has, and this is what I used for the shoe. This is the topology brush. Right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. And I know this is a lot of information. Hopefully you'll be watching the video a couple times and thinking about how you're going to actually utilize these tools. Okay, so another way that gives us less geometry out of the gate is going to be this topology brush. And what it does, I'll just draw it. Oh, I'm going to do it on that because there are multiple subdivisions. It's referencing another piece. I'm going to do that. Let me go to the body. The body does not have. I've got that lower res one. We're going to work with it. Anytime you run into mesh has multiple subdivisions on it, one of the ways around that is just to insert into your scene a basic mesh, like a sphere. You don't need to see it, right? But you want to have it selected while you are drawing on something else. So even if we hide that, this one, I have to hide because it's selected. If I draw here, it's referencing the other piece, but it's drawing on the surface. So the way this brush works is as soon as I draw lines that connect in 4 corners, like a quad or something like that, it's going to generate a polygon. Now, the way I did the foot was I put a plane down, I moved it to underneath his foot, and then I hit everything but his foot, and I drew the shape around his foot so I get the right size. That's kind of what I did. But if we want a little bit more geometry, let's say we're making an arm plate, if I cross over this, you can see that I'm generating more topology. And when I say, all right, I'm ready to make it something, you click on the surface, and there is your new piece of geometry. So for armor plating, this is great. It is a nice way to get something. Anybody doing the Ninja Rabbit or Karate Rabbit? He's got those pads on his arm. Some people are like, I'm not sure how I would make those. This might be a way. It conforms 100% to the surface, which is great. You do have to watch out. It is connected, but all I'm going to do here is go split the parts. Okie dokie. Let's delete the sphere because we don't need it anymore. And now we have that piece. And if we look at that piece, Shift F for my wireframe, what do you notice? It's got polygroups on it. So in my case, right, you already know what I like to do. So let's say that I drew out a tie. I was going to make a tie for my character. Extraction is a little bit kind of chunky. But if I were to draw out a line and I go down, across the bottom and across the top, and maybe give it a couple lines, maybe one through it, one couple across it, and I generated something like this, but it wasn't 100% the shape I wanted, Control Shift, hide everything else but the top polygroup or the bottom polygroup, whatever one you want. Geometry, modify topology, delete it. Now I have that single-sided surface that fits the shape. So now I can go in here and let's say we were going to do a tie. For whatever reason, he's wearing a tie on his arm. I'm going to switch BMV to the move brush. I'm going to make my brush really small. And if you want to move points, you don't want to mess with what I'm kind of messing with now. One of the things you're going to have to do is get into the masking approach where you're masking the points you want to manipulate and then inverting that mask. So that would look like, let's hide everything but this piece. So that would look like this: control, mask, invert, move tool, center it to your selection, which will be right on that vertex. And now you can move that vertex. And then you go to the next one. Clear your mask, mask, invert, center, move. And I heard this artist say in one of his videos, he's like, if this seems tedious, it's because it is. Clear your mask, mask, invert, center, move. You know, and it seems kind of crazy that you have to do all this, but once you get through doing it, it's not that bad. You just kind of go through it. Okay, but I'm more of a, mover like this. So I'm going to go to that. So again, this would be if I was making some sort of necktie or something like that. I'm going to go ahead and mask those off. This time I will move with the larger tool because I can just quickly grab and pull this down, clear, grab that, invert, clear it all the way through. Grab that. This would help shape it on the bottom. All right, but now I can go in there and literally just pull that. All right, let's do a little bit of my modeling. Let's go clear that, switch, Z-modeler. We've already got extrude all polygons. I'm going to go ahead and do it some, let's bring it over there. Let's give it a normal thickness like a regular tile. But if I go ahead and subdivide this, it's going to round out the bottom, not what I want. You will notice that it is holding the edges. This style of building will automatically give you creased edges. You can see those little kind of hazy lines at the edge. What you're going to want to do is, if you don't want to deal with it, if you want to have more control over the surface, you're going to go into crease under geometry, and you're going to look for uncrease. And that's going to go ahead and uncrease all of the edges, or should uncrease all of the edges. I think I have it. Now you don't want to uncrease. Let's go back to like that. There, uncreasing. Now we can go ahead and give it a little bit of thickness. Okay. And what I'm going to try and do here is I'm going to grab an edge, and I'm going to say split edge. I'm going to click on that one, right? You can see that gives me a little bit more geometry. I can delete those if I want to. Right, so we can split, we can pretty much split some of it up. So go ahead and split that one. Split this one. Split this one. And remember, mirroring, if you want to mirror, I'm doing both sides at one time. So. Okay, and then we're going to go in here, we're going to delete some of these edges we don't want. It's going to give you a heck of a time on certain things, trying to isolate what's going on. Now, I haven't done too much testing with it as far as is it trying to be self-preserving, well, it will not get rid of an edge because it needs that. So what I'm going to do is go into bridging vertices. This is how you would connect. Z-modeler, let's do bridge, ring, 2 points. So now if I click on that point and that point, well, it should be doing this. It may not. The way it should be. Bridge, bridge. Good. There we go. Okay, targeting's a little off. So So once I have that on there, I should be able to delete that edge and this edge. So it is kind of like Maya where it wants to self-preserve. But what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to put an edge in there that I can move and make a holder, right? To kind of hold the point at the end of that tie, right? So again, still thinking like Maya. Now, let's say that you're like, man, I don't want to learn something. I don't want to get into that. I understand the tool that you generated this surface with, but I don't understand all that clicking and bridging and all that stuff. What do you know that would allow you to put in the holding geometry you want and split vertices with something like, I don't know, maybe it was like a multi-cut tool. So you can go in there and just add in the holding edges you wanted and then bring it back in. What do you think would allow you to do that? So you've generated the tie shape. And you're like, okay, now I need to adjust some of the geometry, but man, you went over that Z-Modeler thing, and I get some of the tools, but I don't really have time to learn all these other things that he's doing. But I know I need better topology, and I just want to get rid of some of these edges and recut some other ones and put some holding edges in. What could I use?
That sounds a lot like Maya, right?
That is it. It's Maya.
Whoa.
Yeah. Just spit it out of here, bring it into Maya. Don't freeze in your tracks and go, but I want to use that tool. What's important is getting the job done and ready for submission. That's what's important, okay?
Just water on Maya and be done with Maya.
Well, you can quad draw it, but then shaping it, making sure everything sits right, you're going to bring it into the ZBrush.
That's just shape all in Maya. It looks 10 out of 10.
And then you bring it into ZBrush, take your screenshots from there.
Right.
Yeah, in some cases, certain things are better to build in Maya. It's what we know. We can get it done faster, and we are treating this kind of like a production where the due date is here. You got to figure out how to get it done. The only thing that we don't do is swap, reuse, and take parts off the internet. Okay? Just gotta keep saying that. I'm getting it. You're like, I downloaded this full medieval knight costume. What's wrong with that?
I just have one question.
Yeah.
How many people have ever actually used the default head in ZBrush?
A lot.
More than expected?
Yep.
That's sad.
It is, because what happens is if I don't notice it right away, I take a screenshot of it, even if there's a slight doubt that it was produced by the student. I take a screenshot, I send it out to all the other modelers, and I say, has anybody seen this asset before? Just curious. I don't put, so-and-so turned this in and list you as somebody like that. I just put a blanket, hey, got this in a submission, has anybody seen this asset before? And usually someone's like, oh yeah, I saw that on so-and-so station, or this, or Turbo Squid, or we use that for a demonstration, kind of thing. So, we know. There's a lot of things that,
What was the best excuse someone said to
I'm more interested in the worst excuse.
the worst excuse was a guy that took assets from the video game Harry Potter and Goblet of Fire, and he submitted them in 3DF, and they were fully textured. It was Hermione. He submitted Hermione, and her wand was taken out of her hand. And you can go to any data mining website and pull those assets. And we actually found the artist that created those assets. And they were like, yeah, those are the ones we made. This was made by so-and-so, this was made by so-and-so. And the person basically told us that he was appalled that we were accusing him of this, and this was the last time they were ever going to share their professional grade work with us. And they stuck to their guns. We're like, look, if you want, we'll go ahead and have a meeting with the artists that claim that they have this. You don't have any files to back up your claim. So if you want to sit down and get to the table with the artists, and they can talk to you, and at that point they'll know your name and they'll know who you are. So if you want to go down that road, we can. And it was, I can't believe you're accusing me. They stuck to their guns and then hung up on us. And we were like, okay, that'll work itself out. Oh yeah,
It's not.
I don't think they came up yet, actually.
them? Wow.
But I've had a lot. I've had people take stuff blatantly from right out of not Blender but Poser. And there's one called the Genesis model, and I line up vert to vert, edge to edge, poly counts, everything, and they swear it's theirs. I'm like, no, it's not yours. Here's the pair of shoes that I just downloaded that you said you made. No, it's not yours. I know it's not yours. But you lie long enough, you believe it, right? You know what I mean? So. They put more effort into that than they do actually that. Panic. If you ever feel like you want to go down that road, I want to put this out there. Just come talk to me. I'm not going to judge you. I don't care. Stress is stress, and I understand it, and it makes you want to, you're just like, I need to do something. Talk to me first. Please talk to me. I've had people do that too. There is a thing in your student manual talking about self-plagiarism. Please let me know. All right, so you can see here a ton of different ways of making stuff. The ways I've showed you will cover a lot of your builds. I did want to show you the curved strap. It works just like the other thing, but for like belts and stuff. It's really cool. Look at that. It's a tie on it. Maybe it's some sort of polish thing. I don't know. But if I'm going to make a belt on a character, this is probably what I'm going to use. It's a great tool. It makes things that look like straps. Right? It's a little bit more. Let's just okay? So it gives you the geometry. You can tell there's no holding edges, so think beyond what you're doing. If I'm going to use this for stuff, I'm going to add holding edges using ZModeler, but I will take care of the ends here because the ends have star junctions right at the end there. So you're inserting edges with ZModeler is going to throw the edges kind of in a weird way, but it does work out really nicely. It's a great tool. You can control it the same way. So if we wanted to make, let's say we were doing feathers, I'd probably gravitate to this tool to get started with, and then stroke. Remember, under curve modifier, size, fall off, start of my curve, end of my curve, middle of my curve. So I can get in there something like this. All right, and then when we're done, it's clicked on the surface, and now it's a piece of geometry that I can work with. So for belts, for belt loops, I'm not a fan when people try and sculpt out a belt loop out of the pants. If you feel your belt loop is sewn onto the pants. So therefore, I'm going to model it just like an MCR, model it logically, not logistically, we're not doing the plan of attack or anything. Logically how it's made, right? So if it's made with a separate piece, like, an actual pant pocket, right? It's a piece of fabric that's sewn on, the little rivets. Don't try and split that stuff. Build it separate. Lay it onto the surface. Works out a lot better. Okay? So there's a ton of stuff. Have fun with it, right? Do what we did earlier. We need to make this. How are we going to make it? And we came up with a plan. Mask it, extract 0 thickness, Z-remesh, extrude thickness, go in and shape it. Right? We had an idea of what we were going to do. Think like that, right? Everything you're going to build, go for it. Write it out. Okay? And if you're confused or concerned, send me an email. With that said, we're going to go ahead and start wrapping this up. I do want to let you know that I am going to push the deadline for week 2 to Tuesday. We talked about that a little bit in the beginning of the class. So that goes for online and campus. It's definitely going to happen before Monday night, so don't send me a bunch of emails if you don't see it happen until Sunday afternoon. Okay, but I will push that date back to Tuesday. After this week, though, we will resume Monday submissions, okay? So y'all have a good one. Get some work done and enjoy some of